Welcome to Access Academy. We are talking about decoding digital graphic design. Are you ready to take your skills to creating tactile designs to the next level? This is our final installment in this series, and we're going to spend the next 90 minutes exploring the world of digital graphic design in the production of tactile graphics. We'll guide you through the process of producing graphics to be used with technology such as PIAF, pictures in a flash, PageBlaster, PixBlaster, and dynamic tactile displays like the Monarch. Hope you are ready. Now I'm going to turn it over to your presenters, Stephanie, Leslie, and Jean.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you today. My name is Stephanie Walker, and I'm the Outreach Specialist for the Southcentral region, an American printing house for the blind. I really love creating tactile graphics online and did it a little bit as a teacher and hope to really channel my mentors today who taught me all of these skills as we move forward. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Weilbacher. I'm the outreach specialist for the Northwest region with the American Printing House for the Blind. And tactile graphics have a special place with me as I use them, and I love tactile maps and having an opportunity to dive deeper into exploring how to create them has been a lot of fun for me. And now Jean.
We have a special guest, and Jean was in our Mastering the Monarch program, and she's going to share with us in our presentation her individual experience creating a graphic for the Monarch. Jean, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
So I am a TVI up in Vermont. I am also a self-described science nerd. And I took the Monarch training in March, and I have fallen in love with it.
Perfect. Wonderful. We look forward to hearing more from Jean later as we talk specifically about the Monarch. First, we want to put forth just a little bit of a disclaimer for everybody before we dive into this very vast topic in which many webinars and full day trainings could be done. The scope of the webinar that we're doing today is only going to really scrape the surface of designing digital tactile graphics. We are not going to go into a lot of the specifics about Word or PowerPoint. You're going to have to know some basics about the Microsoft ribbon, as well as some basic prerequisite knowledge about Braille. We are going to touch just a little bit on some of the information that was done in the previous webinars that is applicable and needed when you are designing digital tactile graphics. I'll get my words in order very soon, hopefully. But in order to really get all of those design principles down that they spoke about in the other webinars, we do recommend that you go back and you watch webinar 1 and 2, because they're very important in building this progression, as well as building this knowledge and this foundational knowledge about making tactile graphics. The other piece of this disclaimer is we really wrote this piece for teachers who are making tactile graphics on the fly, making them quickly, trying to get graphics in the hands of their students in the classrooms so that they can see them quickly. We know that there are a lot of very specific things that graphic designers do, especially tactile graphic designers, and we will touch on those things, but we will not by any means touch on every single one of them. So make sure you go back and look at your BANA guidelines and those types of things if you are creating tactile graphics on a regular. So of course, we do want to share those 2 webinars that we did before. We're determining the instructional purpose of tactile graphics and designing effective tactile displays. They are both posted on the APH YouTube channel, and you can go watch them at your leisure. Our learning objectives for today: participants will explain the functionality and benefits of various digital graphic design tools in creating tactile graphics. We will identify the process of creating tactile graphics using digital design tools. We're going to evaluate the effectiveness of different digital graphic design tools in producing accessible materials for students with visual impairments. Of course, we're going to want you to develop a plan to incorporate all that you're learning now into your instructional process, ensuring accessibility and inclusivity for your students. And finally, we want to make sure you know how to assess the quality and accessibility of the tactile graphics that are being rendered. So our outline for today, we're going to start with review. So the next section that we'll go into, it will be some review of certain pieces from the first part of the webinars, just to kind of jog your memory and get everybody on the same page. That'll be going over production methods and different elements that you can find in graphics. Then we will have a pretty lengthy section over creating computer graphics in general. And then we'll go back to how do you emboss those graphics, the specific design specifications for designing graphics for the Monarch. Of course, we want to hear from our voice from the field, Jean, and we will end with tips, tricks, and resources. So before we get started on our review and delve into this vast topic, we want you all to take a moment to think about and visualize, picture, or even have sitting in front of you a graphic that you want or need to create for a student. So just have something pictured in mind. Hopefully it's not a very complicated graphic, but something that would be useful. It is definitely going to make this process easier if you think about that graphic from beginning to end. We have some additional questions, so make sure you take a moment and think about that. If you want to share with us what your graphic is, you can definitely share that in the chat.
Okay.
Now that you've thought about your graphic, think about which production method you're going to use to create that graphic. And when we think about the production methods we're going to use, is there one that's being requested? Has somebody requested a certain production method? What resources and equipment do you have available to create a graphic? That's very important, because if you don't have any of the resources available, then you need to make sure you get that and create the graphic that will work on your resources. Which production method will provide the best, most readable graphic? And is the graphic for one-time use or for production of multiple copies? One of the really cool things about creating digital tactile graphics is that you can save that source file and create multiple copies or emboss multiple copies of a graphic. So these tools that we're going to go over today are extremely important as if you need multiple copies of a graphic. Have these things in mind as we work through the next section, and Leslie is going to go over the review.
Right. So just a quick review from our previous webinars. We had some production methods of collage. So that was deeply discussed in the first two, or the first one. Tooled, which was the second one. And this one is all about machine generated. So some machine generated look like thermoform, which was somewhat covered in the first webinar, because that is where you would take your collage graphic and use a thermoform machine to heat a piece of plastic over it so that it conforms to that shape. And that's a way to make multiple copies. Microcapsule or swell, we touched on this before. We'll go into it a little deeper here. And of course, embossed and digital tactile displays like the Monarch. So let's look a little bit at swell paper graphics. You would first create the desired graphic in print, and that's what we're really going to talk about, is that digital file. You would transfer that image onto the swell paper, and that means printing it or photocopying it. And then you run it through the toaster or the heat machine, and the heat actually causes the ink to rise up. And then, of course, you proofread it. And make sure those lines are tactual enough. Looking at embossed graphics, we will be focusing on the APH, PixBlaster, and PageBlaster because they both can produce graphics to varying degrees, but there are many other embossers out there that do so to varying degrees of detail, but not all embossers do so. So you're going to need to look at your embosser very carefully, really know the machine that you have to determine what you can use it to create. Digital tactile display graphics. So for the Monarch, you can download or upload a graphic from either the TGIL or using a jump drive and views this on the 10-line display that has equal distant pins, which allows more of a curve than what you would get out of using a Perkins Brailler to draw. And this allows you to pan and zoom in and zoom out, which is pretty awesome. It also has a graphing calculator, which of course you type in a equation and you tell it to graph, and then you can check out the slope of that line. In very important resource. So a quick review of the elements of graphics, and Jenny did an awesome job going over this in our first webinar, so I'm just going to briefly reiterate some things she said. This is an image she used of a simple map of a town, and we're going to use it to describe some of these pieces. So an area, it's a significant region of a graphic, a significant region being at least 1/4 square inch. It's easier to discern different textures when the area is larger. Some examples and other tactile graphics would be would be areas such as states, provinces, rock layers. In this map, we're look at something like the baseball field. So a line is linear information. There's two kinds. There's primary lines and there's lead lines. So a primary line for this map might be the streets, and the lead lines would be the lines connecting the labels to what they are labeling, the point or line or area. And lines are recommended to be, if using an embosser, the primary lines to be a little heavier than the lead lines. There we go, point. Point is a specific place on a graphic. So example on this would be the post office, but it could be something like a bus stop. And then labels are words, numbers, letters, and a key to identify an area, line, or point symbol. And you want to place those labels at least 1/8 of an inch from any graphic element that they are labeling. The labels in this graphic are pointing out the train station, for example. So to look at these more in depth, you can check out the guidelines and standards graphics, developed under the sponsorship of the Braille Authority of North America, BANA, from 2022, so pretty recent. And I'm going to now hand it over to Stephanie to dive into creating computer-generated graphics.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leslie. Now we're going to dive into computer-generated graphics. And to start that off, we have a question for you. So we're going to run a poll. What digital tools do you use for tactile graphics? Do you use the PIAF swell machine, a graphics-capable embosser, thermoform, digital tactile display, or something else? And you can describe something else in the chat if you would like. We've made this poll multiple choice, so you can actually select multiple options if you use more than one thing. I'm going to give it just a little bit. Leslie, while everybody's voting, what was your favorite digital tool to use to produce tactile graphics?
Oh. You know, the first one I think I was exposed to was definitely thermoform, but I mean, apart from, yeah, you said digital. But I think I've really enjoyed learning about using embossers more to their full effect. I've also seen some pretty awesome maps using swell paper. And I gotta say the Monarch is pretty exciting with the ability to zoom in and pan around. So I don't know if I have a favorite. I think it's gonna depend on what I'm looking at, which should
Awesome.
be the theme of this webinar.
I agree. Actually, I agree. Sorry that I put you on the spot there. Some of our participants have mentioned in the chat box that they have used some collage methods like wiki sticks and textured paper and other things like that to create graphics. And absolutely, that's not one of the ways we focused on here in our digital graphic display, but it is absolutely a worthwhile method and is the best method for some types of things that you're going to create. So it looks like the 69%, so the highest number of people use a graphics capable embosser, almost everyone actually. And then 51% of people use the PIAF or the pictures in a flash or the swell machine. 16% use thermoform, about the same amount use thermoform as the digital tactile display. That's awesome. We also have people who have shared in the chat that they use Tactile View and other software as well. That is awesome. So we're going to delve into several different topics now and get started, but I love all the interaction. And yes, absolutely, creating something quickly in your office with wiki sticks and those types of things is absolutely a good way of doing something. And that has come up a lot, wiki sticks and hot glue in the chat, as well as using the Tactile Graphics Image Library. So we're going to delve into computer-generated graphics. And when you're doing computer-generated graphics, you typically use some type of software program and in combination with a hardware like an embosser, a PIAF machine, a machine of some sort to create tactile graphics using technology. Thermoform, swell, capsule, paper methods are also considered, can be considered computer-generated graphics because like Leslie already explained, when you print off that graphic and on the swell paper and put it through the toaster machine, it raises just as if you were embossing that graphic on an embosser. It's just a little bit different because your lines are solid and things come through in a different manner. So one of the things we wanted to start off with was a very basic understanding of file types. And so typically images come in bitmap or whole image file types. And this is what you're going to come across on the internet. This is what you're going to come across when you take a picture with your phone or typical pictures that are out and about. They are usually in a file format like BMP, GIF, JPEG, PNG, TIF, depending on what was used to take the picture or how the picture was saved. These pictures are whole images. As people have discovered, you can't just change the color of a shirt in the image or the darkness of a line or take out pieces and parts of the image easily because it's saved all in one package. Then you have other types of files. One of those is computer-aided design or CAD files. CAD files can be 2D, but they can also be 3D. They are very highly detailed. They can make 3D objects, pictures, those types of things. They're often used to create floor plans, layouts, and in very high-level technology type jobs and careers. We're not going to talk about CAD types of files today. And then you have scalable vector graphics or scalable vector drawings. And those are the types of graphics we're going to focus on the most today, because those are exactly what they say. They're scalable, which means you can change the size of different pieces within the graphic. They're vector images, meaning you can change the colors, the line thickness, those types of things within those graphics as well. So these are wonderful to work with when you are working with designing computer-generated graphics. Now note that sometimes embossers can read files that are graphics-based files, like BMP, GIF, PNG, or SVG file types. But in general, embossers typically take a different type of file type. These are all graphics-based. Now, we also know file types based on what is used to produce a document or a graphic. And so we are going to go with the easiest one, the one that most people have access to and is most accessible, which is Microsoft Word. But you can do Microsoft Word or PowerPoint can be used, and you can put your SVG graphics, your different types of graphics within that to create a tactile graphic. And those file types are very specific. Word, PowerPoint are very specific to Microsoft products and those things. You can also use Keynote, Pages, Slides, Docs, basically any word processor, any PowerPoint type application or presentation type application that allows you to either save as a JPEG or a PNG, or to export as a PDF. And so those are what we're going to focus on. But a lot of what we talk about today can absolutely be done in other applications just as easily. And then you have the PDF file type. And the PDF file type is a print-ready file type. So it is as if somebody handed you a document, and that document is the right size. So the size is going to stay the same. The font is going to stay the same. All the margins where things are added on the page, all of that stays the same when you open it because it's saved within that print-ready file. PDFs have come a long way. They're no longer like whole images anymore, and you can take pieces and parts of them and do different things to them if you have the right software. But in general, it is a print-ready file. Embossers, some very specific embossers, use something that's similar to a PDF. It's called a PRN. And that is a print-ready file for an embosser. It's kind of the same type of thing. It saves all of that information in there. But because it's specifically for an embosser, the information is about how the embosser is going to create that graphic, not how is it going to be viewed in print on a page. So now that I have probably confused some of you already, I want to talk about what software we use to create all of these different types of files that we've talked about, because file type matters when it comes to embossing or using your graphic on a refreshable display, all of those different pieces. You can create all sorts of graphics in all sorts of software. Microsoft Word and PowerPoint are readily accessible, and so we're going to focus on those today. Canva is a new tool that has been out for a little while, but it's free for teachers. It's a subscription-based tool that allows you to do a little bit more with graphics. It also has a very large graphics library that includes scalable vector graphics, allowing you to make some changes to those. It also will allow you to make some changes and do some things to your whole image graphics that you may not be able to do in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. You can also use Corel Draw or any of the higher level graphics programs. I have Procreate on my iPad. I have Adobe Illustrator on my computer. All of those types of things can be used to create graphics. Anything you can use to draw. And then you could use some different types of software that are very specific to creating tactile graphics. And those would be software like Tactile View, the Tiger software suite, which is for the PixBlaster, or Firebird for the PageBlaster. There are other things out there as well. When I was doing graphics in the field, I used QuickTack to create some graphics and drop them into Duxbury. You can do that same type of process with creating graphics and dropping them in to other programs as well. So just know that anything that lets you draw and bring in Braille and a Braille font will allow you to create a tactile graphic, as long as you can save it in the right file format. Another very important thing to understand about the technology that you're using is dots per inch. When we are embossing a graphic, dots per inch matter, as well as when you're creating graphics to be rendered on a digital display. Dots per inch measures resolution. And so on a printer, you hear dots per inch. It's actually how many ink dots you can get and how good that resolution is going to be. The higher the dots per inch, the more detail there is. And the lower the dots per inch, the less detail there is. In my head, it helps me to think about a piece of graph paper, and the more columns and rows that you have on that piece of paper, the denser it gets and the more detail you have. Whereas the less columns and rows you have on a piece of paper, it is less dense and less detailed. So on the screen, I do have two squares. They don't look the same size, but they are the same size. One has 5 rows and 10 columns, I believe, and the other one has 4 rows and 4 columns. And so you can kind of see that there's a difference in the amount of detail that will come through. The other thing to keep in mind when you're creating tactile graphics is to keep it simple and specific. You want to make sure you begin with the end in mind. And that's one of the reasons that we asked about your production methods, what tools you have access to, all of those things at the beginning, because that matters during the creation process. We don't want you to get all the way through creation and then realize that the software program you're using to create that tactile graphic does not save in the format that your embosser reads or that your display reads. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Along with keep the end in mind is remember the instructional purpose. We're not going back and covering all the aspects of determining the instructional purpose and going through those pieces from webinar 1, but it is all applicable, including the worksheet where you lay out that tactile graphic and you think through it from the beginning. So don't ever start to design a tactile graphic without trying to think through all of those pieces and being prepared, because you might get very frustrated changing things throughout the process. And then importantly, and as a teacher, it's probably the most important thing to think about is what is the skill level of the reader of the graphic. We want to make sure that we're teaching and designing these tactile graphics in a way that your students are able to learn about them and read them and get the concepts that are being expressed through the graphic. So it's not as important in situations where you are doing these instructional graphics to be specific to exactly what is on the page, but it is important for you to be specific to exactly what the instructional purpose is, and making sure you align that instructional purpose with the needs of the student so that they can complete the task or the assignment or gain the concept. And one thing we want everybody to remember, I know it's been gone over several times already, but we do want you to keep it in mind. Complicated graphics, they may need to be broken up, or details that are not needed for the instructional purpose be left out in order for them to be tactually discernible for the student. And this might change depending on what your student is able to take out of that graphic at a time. And hopefully you're building for your student their ability to read more complicated graphics by breaking them down and then putting them back together. So this next section, I am going to go over some basics and some things to set up in Word or PowerPoint to get started on your tactile graphics journey. I'm going to go through these slides a little faster than I normally would, and that's because at the end of all of this, I do have a video demo to actually show you how to do it. And I think that part is going to help you a lot in understanding these pieces, but it'll also give some reinforcement to what we're walking through. When I walk through the slides, I'm going to walk through and tell you the keystrokes on the slides to accomplish these tasks. In the video, I use a combination of keystrokes or shortcut keys, as well as my mouse, to really talk through and show you the menus and things for those of us that are light dependent and really need to see those things, and our mouse users. I think that's very important. So the first thing you want to do is configure your page size. A normal Braille page is typically not the same size as a page that you would bring up in a basic Word document. So you can actually change the page size in both a Word document, and you can change the slide size in a PDF or a slideshow. And that allows you to print that in a slide size or in a page size rather than the other way. It also saves it as that page size when you say one slide by itself. So Alt-P will open the Layout tab in Word. SZ will open the size menu, and M for more paper sizes, because our typical Braille paper size of 11.5 by 11 is not listed in Microsoft's list. On the PowerPoint, you're going to use Alt-G to open the Design tab. And then in PowerPoint, it is a right-click menu on the slide itself that opens up for you to change the slide. So you want to make sure your focus is on the slide itself. And then you can use PS to open the slide size, and C for custom slide size. And so you don't have to do the normal size. You can actually put in inches just like paper. And the benefit, if you're a mouse user, to using PowerPoint is things do not snap to a grid. You can move them around freely. You don't have to worry about some of the things you do in Word. And then I was taught this many years ago, and it is a tool I use very often in Word, and that is turning on the drawing grid. If you don't know what the drawing grid is, it's basically a piece of graph paper that comes up and has lines on the page for you. But those graphing lines that go on the paper for you on the screen do not print. They don't show on the embosser or anything else, because they're actually just there to help you align objects on the screen. So I do recommend everybody set up a drawing grid when they start, because it's definitely going to help you better align your labels, as well as ensure that your objects are not too close together as they're coming through. So in order to do that, in both PowerPoint and Word, it is Alt-W to open up the View tab, and then G is a check and uncheck grid lines. So if you want to see it afterwards, then you uncheck it and take the grid lines off, or check it and bring it back. It's a really awesome tool to use when you're designing things. And then within that, I encourage you to actually configure the drawing grid and to change your grid settings in Word just a little bit, or PowerPoint. So in Word, it is Alt-P to open the Layout tab. AG opens the Align drop-down menu, and then S will take you to Grid Settings, which is a pop-up box. And then we'll go over the settings in the next slide. In PowerPoint, Shift F10, when you're focused on the slide, will open the right-click menu, and then you arrow down to Grid and Guides and press Enter. You have much fewer choices in PowerPoint, and that's because some of the things that you're able to turn on and off in Word are natively just off and not available to turn on in PowerPoint. So now going over that pop-up box specifically and what should and shouldn't be checked inside of it, you can uncheck Snap Object to Other Objects. That's going to keep them from aligning to each other, allowing you more maneuverability throughout the document. I skipped one. On the very top, it says Display Alignment Guides. That is completely up to you. But when you have your alignment guides displayed, your grid lines don't show up. And so it's kind of a choice box. In your grid settings, they are defaulted typically to 0.13 inches. 0.13 inches is about 1/8 of an inch, which is an important measurement when it comes to spacing with labels and different objects. We actually want you to change it to 0.25, because 0.25 is 1/4 of an inch, which is another very important spacing. And it actually allows you a little more maneuverability, but you can absolutely leave it at 0.13 if that works best for you. Just know how much space you have between those grid lines. It's definitely going to help you align objects. You want to uncheck, if it is checked, the display grid lines on. I skipped. Uncheck use margins. Check display grid lines on. So if you uncheck use margins, your grid lines will go all the way to the bottom of the edge of the page, which is what we want. And then check display grid lines on screen. That's so that you can see them. Set your vertical and your horizontal to 1. They may be defaulted this way in yours. There's another box on the end, at the end of that says Snap Objects to Grid when the grid lines are not displayed. And that may actually help some of our non-visual users be able to align their objects a little bit better using the grid lines. But I'll show you how everything kind of moves around in our demo that we do. Now, some of the tips and tricks to when you're doing things in Word that you may not know is when you have a shape and you drop a shape in Word and you go to change the sizes, the proportion of that shape typically changes. You can take a circle and turn it into an oval. You can take an isosceles triangle and drag it out and turn it into a different type of a right angle triangle. There are lots of different things that you can change by just maneuvering around. But what people don't realize typically is that you can hold the Shift key while you press the click and drag, and it will keep your proportions the same. Okay. And if you're doing that in a non-visual manner, you can press Alt-JP, that's for the Shapes Format tool. Now you have to be on a shape for the Shapes Format tool to come up. Okay, then H for height and W for width. Use your up and down arrows to make adjustments, or you can put in numbers in there. This is not just a non-visual way to do this. Do know those heights and width sections are very useful when you're trying to make things match, make things the same size, or just make a line straight that went a little wonky when you were drawing it. So that's important. And then you can change the location of the element on the page non-visually by using some of the tools that are native in Word. It's real easy to click and drag it, so you can click and drag it around. The other thing is when you have your grid on, you can actually also use your arrow keys even when you don't have your grid on. But when you have your grid on, it will move it one box at a time through up and down and left and right when you just use your arrow keys to nudge it one way or the other. You can also press Alt-JP to get back into that Shapes Format tool, and then PO, and then L, and that will take you to the different alignment options for that shape. It's usually top left, middle, top right, all of those different things. So if you want to make sure the shape you drew ends up in the top left-hand corner non-visually, you can absolutely do that. Or if you want to make sure it's right in the middle of the page, you can tell it to put it right in the middle of the page. Textures are something we want to definitely bring up and talk about individually, because when you're doing computer generated graphics, you do have to be extremely careful with the textures that you use. And that's because depending on the dots per inch that we talked about earlier, depends on how much detail will come out on the other side. And that leads to things with legibility, not legible. Now, I'm going to share with you what BANA says the collection of things that you can use and different textures that you can use for tactile graphics in different formats. However, our ultimate goal is readability by the student. If a student is not able to tactually discern a texture, then we need to work on that skill more, but we also need to ensure that we're using textures that can be tactually discernible. And it may be necessary for younger students for you to use less textures in the beginning and build them as they go and they get used to really discerning different things in the tactile graphic. So going through the textures that are BANA approved for embossing, and this comes from the 2022 BANA guidelines. You have a solid gray fill, a solid white, like just a solid white box. You have diagonal lines that are going through. You have dots. You have some larger dots that look a little bit more like diamonds. And then you have both vertical and horizontal lines that can be used. All of those same textures are also in the microcapsule options. But remember, microcapsule actually has a much higher DPI than any of our embossers because of the way it raises in full lines. So our embossers, the PixBlaster has a renderable DPI of about 17, whereas your PageBlaster is about 15 and the Monarch is about 12. So you kind of know where those things stand when we're looking at textures, and your microcapsule will give you the most detail. Leslie will go over that again when we talk about embossers. So microcapsule has all the same ones, but they have an additional smaller dotted pattern, a kind of grayed out cloudy pattern, as well as a crosshatch pattern, what looks like other like inline dot patterns with a little bit of a larger dot. And then they still have your vertical and horizontal lines, but they have two different versions of them. One, the lines are closer together, one, the lines are further apart. Now, you may be asking yourself, this is all great, but I have no clue where to find those things in Word. It's really easy, really easy. When you're filling a shape in Word, Your shape fill will be on the shapes format tool. So you will go to SF and you will use your down arrow once you get into the shape fill. And on the far left-hand column, there is, it goes from white to gray all the way down, or white or black all the way down. You want to avoid the darkest gray and the darkest black. And you don't really want to use any other colors for fill unless you have an embosser that actually can use those colors and will render different things for those. Typically, you want to stay with your grayscale shades. And then your patterns are in a little bit of a different area. You want to go A and then tab your arrow keys, but see, it's in your fill effects. And so I will show you how to get to all of that when we get to the demonstration, but it's all under the same shape format menu. And your patterns will open up, and you can see that there are a ton of different patterns. You can change your foreground color or your background color. I would typically always leave my foreground and background color as white and black. I'm going to show you all of this. So just wait just a couple more minutes and we'll get into the demo where we kind of show you how we walk around it. So our Banna also gave us some line styles. And the biggest thing I want you to take away from this slide itself is that embossing, you have many fewer line styles available for you to use than you do on microcapsule, just like with your textures. So in embossing, and in microcapsule, and in anything you do, a 1-point line is the smallest line that is recommended. So do know that that is there. A 3-point line in black will come out darker. You can also use a dotted line in 2.5 point and a black dash line in 3.0. And then in embossing, you can use 2.0 lines in your arrows. And you can do an open, like an open arrow at the end, or a closed or open triangle, or a closed triangle at the end. All of those same things are available on microcapsule. With microcapsule, you have a lot more options on your dotted lines, as well as some of your other line thicknesses. Now, I'm going to tell you, as we go through and we're talking about this, I don't have Banna guidelines for digital tactile displays. And that's because digital tactile displays are new. And so transcribers are now working through the process of developing some guidelines. It's a very complicated process because not only do you have the picture file type, all the different pieces, resolution may or may not change depending on the digital display that you're using or how much you're zoomed in on that display. All of those things come into play. So we don't have any Banna guidelines or any strict guidelines for things like digital displays. Braille labels, okay? Make sure you use a Braille font. There are many different types of Braille fonts out there that are available for free. Braille 29 is the font that we use the most. And do know there's something special for you to know about these fonts. It says Braille 29, and it should be helpful to help you remember to put it in 29-point font. That's the point font it's supposed to be in also. It is important that your Braille is at the right size for your end result. Place your Braille labels a minimum of 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch away from anything. And this is where those grid lines really come in and are helpful. Always place your Braille labels horizontal on the graphic. There are a few instances and situations in which labels can be placed vertical, and those are for maps and different things like that, but they're very specific. So make sure you go back to your Banna guidelines and look for those specifics. But for the most part, they should be horizontal, and print should read left to right on a tactile graphic, just as it would when you're reading Braille. Capitalization should follow print. And a grade 1 indicator is required if you are using single letters that are uncapitalized. But if you are using single letters that are capitalized, then you do not need a grade 1 indicator. You will just need a capital indicator. And this comes down to space saving and just understanding in that way. Labels that are split between 2 lines, your run-on line should be left justified. So now that is by no means everything that comes into play with labels. There are a lot of specifics in BANAs about labels, but these are very important specifics that lead to more legibility and readability in a tactile graphic. Now, some of you might be really frustrated by the fact that I said Braille font, and then you know that, oh my goodness, a Braille font is only going to give me letters. How do I get the capital sign? How do I get contractions? How do I get through everything I need to? Letters, all of those different aspects of things. So there is something called an ASCII language, and that's what it is for Braille. It is learning which keyboard keys you need to push in order to get it to output what you want it to output in the end. And so I've included an ASCII and QWERTY keyboard here. I will tell you personally, when I forget what my ASCII stuff is, I Google it and typically get to the right answer. But once you get used to this, then you'll get there and it will be very, very easy. All right. So now we are going to look at this quick little demonstration, and I'm going to talk through it. All right. So in this, I have gone through and I'm going to show you how to set up your template. We go to the layout. And you can change your size with the size, but instead of doing that, I expand this page setup dialog box. And that way I can change all of my margins, and I'm changing my margins, top 0.5, bottom 0.4, left 0.6, right 0.5. And I'm making sure my gutter positions are at 0. Then I go over 1, and I change my width to 11.5. And then I'm going to say, okay, it's going to give me an error about the margins, but I don't care about the margins, so I'm going to say ignore it. After I do that, I am going to go into, there we go, into the align button there so that I can show you on this same tab that you can view grid lines, you can use alignment guides, and your grid settings are there also. So I've turned the grid lines on. I've gone to grid settings. Display alignment guides is unchecked. Snap objects to other objects is unchecked. I'm going to change my horizontal and vertical spacing and uncheck my use margins. And I changed horizontal and vertical to 0.25. And I press OK, and the whole grid changes to go to the end of the page. I'm going to zoom out so you can see that it's an 11.5 by 11.5 page, and the grid goes all the way to the end. Now I'm going to go to the Design tab. And under the Design tab, I'm going to go into Colors, and I'm going to go down and select Grayscale. This will make everything I put in grayscale. And then I'm going to go over to Fonts. I'm going to select Customize Fonts, and go in and change my fonts to Braille 29 for both headings and body, and I'm going to save it as a Braille 29. And when I do that, that allows me to very easily change the font size and everything that is going on there. And you can see that the default fonts start to change. So then I'm just kind of showing you some of the other things that you can change with paragraph spacing. I'm going to leave it the way it is. I'm going to make sure I have normal effects on so I don't get any shadows or anything. And then I am going to go back to the home button. Oh, no, I'm not. I skipped a step. I'm going to go show you where the unchecked and checked grid lines is under the view button. It's right underneath ruler. There's a check box, mark box. It's super easy and simple to check and uncheck, and that allows you to kind of check your work. Then I'm going to home, and I'm going to expand the styles button. I'm going to normal, and I'm going to modify the normal style and change it to Braille, Braille 29, and I'm going to change that font size to 29-point font size. That will change all the settings in my document so that it is defaulted, so that anytime I write something, it uses the Braille 29 font at 29-point size. That's going to make my life a whole lot easier when I go through and I start adding my Braille tags. So I'm going to close that out. And then I'm going to show you how to file and save as. And I'm going to name this Braille 29 template. There is actually a file type called DOTX, not .x, that is a template file type. And when you save a template as this file type, when you reopen it, it will reopen and require you to name the file. It won't save over your template. And so this is really, really a great way of doing things. So now on the screen, you should see a little clip. I had an area of a triangle. That's what I'm going to do and show you how. I have opened a document from the template that I saved on my desktop. I am now saving it, naming it and saving it so I don't lose it in case my computer crashes. And I am bringing up next to it the area of a triangle that I am replicating in a tactile graphic. So now we go to the Insert tab. Under Illustrations, because I have everything zoomed in a little bit, you have Shapes. And I'm going to draw an isosceles triangle on the screen. You can also just click on the screen and it will draw that triangle for you. I'm going up to the colors to show you where you can change your colors. You will see that it defaulted to draw that triangle in gray because it's in a grayscale. I opened up the entire Styles, Shape Styles menu, which opened up in a right-hand panel. And I'm showing you now in that right-hand panel where your patterns are. Even though I didn't need a pattern in here, I wanted you to see that process. Okay. After we go through that, I'm going to set it to solid fill. I'm going to leave mine solid white. And I'm going to darken the line around the outside of it because I was making a graphic specifically for the Monarch. So I'm not exactly following all of the rules, the banner rules for embossing in this because I am altering it just a tad to make things darker so that they come up or thicker so that they're coming up better through my Monarch. And it's just the way the digital tactile display is behaving today. And so I go in and darken that. And then we're going to illustrate the lines on the bottom for the base and the height. Now I chose a line with arrows at the end, and the arrows at the end ended up not coming through on the Monarch because they ended up being too small. And so if I were to go in and redo this, I would darken that line, make it bolder, save it again, and move it to my Monarch. I am going to fast forward just a little bit through this area because I know we're running a little late on time, and I actually am creating in this 2 arrows. I'll do one horizontal and one vertical. So I'm using the copy paste button to make one vertical. And when I went to make it vertical, I actually went to the shape format tool and the size. Oh, this one I did rotate. And so you can flip and then you can rotate an angle. So this one I rotated, but you can actually also use your height and width to change your height and width. And if you ever get one of those lines that is just a little bit crooked and you just can't get it to line up straight, you can go into that height and width tool and make sure that either your height or width, depending whether it's a vertical or not, is set to 0, and that will align that line up like nothing. So I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. Or all the way. Let's see. I thought I was fast forwarding the right thing. Here we go. Now I have dropped a braille label in. When I dropped the braille label in, I went to insert a text box. I then went to my shapes format tool from that text box and made sure that the background was set to clear and that there was no outline around it, so that we didn't end up with any extraneous lines. The other tip I have on this section is your comma is your capital letter. Get used to that one because you'll use that one the most. Okay? And then I'm going to skip to the very end of this so you can see what the final picture looks like, because all I'm doing now is aligning braille labels. And then I take the grid off at the end and you can see the entire picture as it comes through. And everything came through wonderfully on the Monarch except for the arrows at the end. And so I just need to make those darker. And then I show you how to save as a PDF. A lot of, depending on what your printer or what your embosser or your digital tactile display will read, you can save as a PDF. JPEG is not an option, or PNG picture files are not an option from Word, but you can save it as a PDF and then convert that PDF into a picture file. That was a lot to go over and could have been a full day workshop in itself. So I hope I haven't lost too many of you. So now we are going to skip this poll. We can do it. It's fine. What application do you plan on using to create your digital tactile graphic file? Keeping in mind the production method and the file type that's going to be needed to produce that file. Are you going to use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, Canva, Corel Draw, Tactile View, Tiger Software Suite, Firebird, or other? And if you're going to use other, please put it in the chat. We want to know what tools you're using out there to create tactile graphics, or even what tools you're using to create other things. Adobe Illustrator, wonderful option. All right. As we're doing this poll, I'm going to apologize to Leslie because we're running a little later than we expected. And she has a lot to share with you, I know. It sounds like most of you, or looks like most of you, are going to use Microsoft and Word and PowerPoint. A few of you are going to use Canva. Canva is a wonderful tool, and I absolutely love using it too. Corel Draw for some, Tactile View. We also have a few Tiger Suites and Firebird and other. But the biggest one by far was Microsoft Word. All right, Leslie's going to go over the process to emboss.
All right. So I won't belabor the point of the PixBlaster and the PageBlaster. The PixBlaster definitely has more graphics capability. It has 7 dot heights, and the PageBlaster is graphics capable, but they're more simple. And but it is a workhorse of an embosser. So let's look at an example. Here is a map of Florida that I also stole from Ginny in our first webinar. but I decided this was a good opportunity to take her good example and expand upon it. So if we consider the instructional purpose, as we should, consider the student first, making this map of Florida for a student, it's going to be complicated to emboss. It's very cluttered. Knowing the instructional purpose is locating a few specific cities, maybe considering some key features like the shape of the state and cardinal directions and large landmarks, and getting rid of some unnecessary features like the small cities and the rivers and parks. That would definitely declutter this a lot. So first thing is to go to the Tactile Graphic Image Library, which is imagelibrary.aph.org, and log in and search. I literally just wrote in Florida, but you could also be more specific and write Florida map, and you get a few options, but there is a very good, very simple outline of Florida, and that is what I chose. You view and download, and you get 3 options to download. If you choose original, that equals it will download as a PDF. If thumbnail and preview both come out as JPEGs. If you download the PDF and you want to pull it into Firebird, for example, to add your Braille labels, you will have to convert it to a JPEG, and you can use an online converter to do that. So now we're going to open it in an editing software so we can add those Braille labels to put the cities on the map that the student needs to find. So we're going to customize the graphic, and using Braille 29 or 80% dots or Braille 36. Those are the 3 standard choices. Don't forget your BANA guidelines and when putting labels and lead lines and point symbols. Remembering that an area is at least 1/4 square inch. Well, this graphic, we've got more than that. We've got the whole state of Florida and the ocean around it as our big areas. You don't have to use a texture here. You certainly could choose a one for the water and leave the land empty, or vice versa, but you don't need to. I would think back at what my student needs. Is distinguishing something amongst a texture difficult? Is distinguishing between the 2 different textures challenging? Does it clutter the map too much? You think through all of those questions. I already said that. So then once you get everything you want in place, and you will send it to your embosser. And then of course you are going to proofread it. You want to make sure everything is in place the way you want it, that it's legible, and you think it will work for your student. If it doesn't, hey, you already have the major part of the work done. You just tweak it and emboss it again. So let's look at the self-evaluation rubric again. Ginny and Leanne brought this up in the first webinar, but it is good to keep in mind. You want to make sure the graphic can be read and understood. Convey the instructional purpose. Have enough detail, but not too much detail to detract from definition. And is it well labeled and titled? And appropriate textures. And of course, hopefully it will be age grade level appropriate. So now I'm going to go into designing for the Monarch. The Monarch guidelines that we can say with some assurity at the moment but this is a evolving device. So they're eerily similar to a lot of other things we've talked about. Make the graphic as clean and uncluttered as possible with clear delineations between elements. Be cautious about shape fills. I will say even more. You want to save the file type as a document that can be opened on the Monarch's tactile viewer. But you can experiment, and you don't need to be afraid to make mistakes on this. And of course, you're going to ask your students for feedback to improve your graphics production. A few of the file types for the Monarch real fast are PDFs, which we've talked about a lot, JPGs, which we've talked about a lot, PNGs. We haven't talked a lot about those, but yeah, they're another one that works well on the Monarch. Just to note that the PDFs only have one zoom level, the zoomed out version and the zoomed in version. JPEGs and PNGs do have multiple levels of zoom, so you can zoom in a couple of times. I think because a lot of this is very similar to other things we have said, let's introduce Jean. Jean is our guest from our voice from the field, who has a very special story to share with us. Take
Hi,
it away,
everybody.
Jean.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Jean. I received my Monarch training on March 6th and 7th. And about a month later was the total eclipse. And where I am in Vermont, was part in the totality. So I decided that I wanted to have a series of images to show the relative positions of the sun, moon, and earth, plus what the sun looked like, taking bites out of it. I started by looking at the tactile graphics library, and it didn't really have what I wanted. So I decided to jump in headfirst and make some graphics myself to be used on the Monarch so I could show my student. So I researched images on the web just to get an idea of different ways to create it. And then I started. So decisions I had to make were whether the sun was going to be with all the pins up or was going to be the circle with the pins down inside. Had to decide what kind of fill I was going to use for the umbra, what types of lines, thicknesses of lines, how to do the moon, whether it was going to be solid or not. So I did a lot of saving as I was doing this, and then saving it on a thumb drive and then moving it to the Monarch and seeing how that looked, and then moving it back because it didn't work right because I didn't have any of the guidelines in terms of what was going to show up on the Monarch. So I just started experimenting. So I would say experimenting is a great way of learning what works and what doesn't work. I had to work on where the positioning of the braille, the font size, making sure that it wasn't too close to anything. So I put those in text boxes so I could move them around and make sure they showed up on the Monarch. One of the things that I did do is as I was creating this, I did have a braille user check to see whether it was readable. I think that's a good idea to have somebody who accesses things tactily to actually check and make sure that it works. So at the bottom there, you see that's the corona, by the way, which I created by making a lot of different triangles in different sizes and gluing them on there. I went into a rabbit hole. I had so much fun with this. I did a lot of grouping and ungrouping so that I could make it consistent, since I was having 5 different images on different pages. I wanted it to be consistent. And I wanted to be able to move the moon and change what the bottom looked like, totality or the first little bite, etc. Then I had to decide how I wanted to distinguish the earth, which that is my little mouse pad drawing of that's supposed to be North and South America, but it is what it is. Then I want to, even though, so I used to teach chemistry and physics. So as I said, I'm a science nerd, but astronomy was not my specific talent. So decided I sent all of the images after they were created. I sent them to our state meteorologist and said, are these accurate? So that created a whole bunch of other problems because he loved it. And he decided, he's like, oh, can you send up some tactile images so that we can have them for our display when we have the totality? So these were also done on the PIAF. And the nice thing is I could do a version with print on it, and then I put braille labels over it, clear braille labels, so that people who had vision could still read it, and people who didn't have vision and knew braille could see it. And we had all of those available at VABVI, Vermont Association for the Blind. And we had the Monarch going. We had some people coming over and checking it out. So the downfall of it was it took me a long time because I didn't know what I was doing. So this was not one of those quick, I'm going to do it. Oh, the teacher wants this, in a tactile form. I'm going to do it right now. That didn't happen. It was much more long-term, and part of that was because of the learning curve. And I think in the end, my student got something out of it. People in his class were fascinated by it, and it did what I wanted it to do. Is there another picture of?
Yes.
So as you see here, I added a dotted line as the moon is in a different position, and I wanted to be able to show that part of the sun was covered and part was not. So as I said, I got a little scientific in this, but that's who I am. And that was short and sweet. Are there any, should I ask you, Stephanie, if you have any questions or something else I should say?
What program did you use to
Oh.
create this?
Good point. I did this in Word. So because it was all, except for North and South America, it was all basic shapes. Word worked really well, and I was able to move things around. And then I saved, every time I saved it as a PDF, and then put it on the thumb drive and brought it over to my Monarch, which was right next to me, and checked it out. So I think after you do one of these once and experiment, it's going to go a lot faster, and you'll be able to do a lot more things on the fly.
Have you done anything else recently?
I have not. I'm going to. I was trying to decide what my next goal was, and I was looking on the tactile graphics image library and seeing, it's like, okay, what don't they have that my student would be good for my student? So yes, I do plan on doing more of these. The other thing is, I didn't know at the time, I didn't have the ASCII QWERTY keyboard information. Luckily, somebody on the Monarch discussion board helped me out with that. So that is a really good thing to know, is how to do things other than the alphabet and put it into a Word document.
Yes. We did have a question come in. Did you use the Braille 29 font on? Do you remember?
No, I did not. So here we have several different Braille fonts. And so I played around using a Braille font and played around with the size until it worked well on the Monarch. That was another experimental. I hadn't heard about Braille 29.
Yes. So, and that goes back to everything right now is really experimental with Monarch, and we've had to, as we've learned about it, go through the process of determining which Braille font works best. And it really depends a lot on your Zoom level and your there's a lot of different pieces. Braille 29 and Braille 36, I believe, are the two that work the best that we've found. But there are definitely other ones out there.
The other thing I really experimented with was the line width. And the patterns, making sure that they showed up correctly on the Monarch. I had some failures. I probably, as I look at this, one thing I probably would have done would change, might be making the moon, the outline a little higher points, because on the Monarch, the moon sort of disappears when it's in its small stage, but it shows up great when you zoom in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean, for sharing with us your experience. I know it's not easy to share with everybody your learning experience going through this, but I think it's much appreciated that it's a trial and error method right now with the Monarch. And it does take you a little bit to learn these skills, but once you've learned them, you can use them to do things much quicker in the future.
And you'll probably end up going down a rabbit hole, so to speak, and you're going to want to keep tweaking it, and then it's like, oh wait, I can do this. So it's a lot of fun.
We've been saying go catch butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So I'll just quickly go through a few last things. A pro tip that you might want to consider is, since we've talked about some very specific things in Word, you might want to consider just creating your own ribbon. You can customize the ribbon or make a or put it in the quick access toolbar, all the things that you use most often. Something else that is a fun experiment, especially for students maybe, is Microsoft Designer. It is AI generated images. There's an iOS app or a website, and you just log in with your Microsoft account, and you choose coloring book pages, and you can customize any of the prompts to find what you're looking for. It does save as a PNG, so you do get multiple levels of zoom, and it's it's kind of fun. So this is an example that they had, and this is a garden gnome and writing a snail, and it comes with this is the exact prompt that it gave, and you can change all of the pieces to this, except I wouldn't change things like simple line drawing with no shading, coloring book style, black and white illustration, minimal, open space between. These are a lot of good keywords to use. And I did try this on the Monarch, and you can zoom in quite far, and it is very distinguishable. However, it's a funny creature. If I didn't have the context, if I didn't know what I was looking for, I'd be like, what am I looking? So context is always very important. But I could see this as being something your students reading a storybook in class, and they're talking about a gnome, and they're like, what does a gnome look like? Oh, look, you can come up with a gnome real fast. However, cautionary note, it is AI. It is not perfect. I asked for a simple plant cell, and I got what I would call an amalgamation of a bacterium and an animal cell. So fair warning. But students could have fun tweaking the words to create their own images this way. A few other resources for students that might be worth looking into would be the New York Public Library Dimensions Lab, Blind SVG, so you can create SVG graphics by coding, and Tada, which is Tactile Art and Design Adventures. That is a series of lessons that take you from doing that collage graphic all the way through using Blind SVG to digitize it. Okay.
Our time is up.
Yeah, got it.
But I do want to share one slide with y'all about sharing your tactile graphic with the Tactile Graphics Image Library, only because somebody in the chat box said they wish there was a way that they could share graphics with each other. And this is a way, because you can submit those graphics. All right.
Leanne?
You could not hear me. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for presenting on digital tactile graphic design.